Hi, welcome to Coffee and Kolache at the National Czech and Slovak Museum and Library. I'm Stephanie Cohen. I am the curator, and I've been here since 1999, so this is going on year 25 for me, which is handy this year because we're actually celebrating our 50th anniversary. And this has caused us to go through our archives and our exhibits and our collections and probably all the other departments as well to kind of go through what's been going on the last 50 years and see how far we've come. So the reason we have 2024 is our 50th anniversary is because in 1974, several organizations were formed, including the Czech Fine Arts Foundation. And this was a group that created an exhibition of treasured family heirlooms, Czech and Slovak artifacts, and it was at what is now the Cedar Rapids Museum of Art. I think it had a different name back then. And it was a very popular exhibit. Everybody was really surprised at how interested people were in all these beautiful Czech and Slovak heirlooms. So the idea kind of was formed to create a museum. So that's kind of where our start is. That's where we get our 1974 to 2024 is 50 years. And so today I'm going to talk about the history of exhibits, and the reason why I've looked into this will become clear later on in the program. The first exhibition after the art museum was the acquisition of a little house on C Street right here in Czech Village, and that opened, I believe, in 1979. There was an exhibition there, so the things that had been on display in the art museum and probably many more were put there. I've seen pictures of that museum. I didn't live in Cedar Rapids then, so did not see it for myself with my own eyes. And then in 1981, a larger space was found. You might remember a little cinder block building at the base of the 16th Avenue Bridge, and that became the larger museum building. And that had a mezzanine level and a second sort of, so you had a second floor there. So there was room to store things and room for all the slaugher exhibitions. And there was like a team of volunteers then who kind of ran everything and ran the exhibits. The Slager Immigrant Home, which is really technically our largest artifact, and that's also an important exhibit that we have, that was added in the early 1980s. So that was moved across the river, and it was furnished with period antiques kind of to the 1900 year. And it was telling the story of an immigrant family from what was then probably would have been Bohemia when they came over in the 1880s. So that's a very popular exhibit that we have ongoing. It's changed a little bit over the years, but we still have that exhibition. So this was all going on, a lot of building up to needing more space. So then the Red Roof building was dedicated in 1995, and that was a big deal in Cedar Rapids. And the exhibits were moved into that much larger space. And there was a space of about 4,000 square feet for the exhibitions in that building. So the big major exhibit that probably everybody will remember is in 1997, 1,000 Years of Czech Culture was placed in the Red Roof building. And that was a really big deal for Cedar Rapids. That was a exhibit that had been created by the National Museum in Prague for a museum, I think in New Salem, which was, and some people here heard about it and contacted the organizers and asked, couldn't it travel to Iowa before it left the country, which is really fortunate that it was here at that time. So I think that kind of put, exhibit-wise, the museum kind of on the map, because that was really an exciting exhibition full of wonderful things that you don't often see in this country. If you're going to have 1,000 years of Czech culture, you know, our country has 200 years of colonial culture or German heritage and Czech heritage, and we just don't go back that far. So it was really important culturally for the museum, and it really set the stage for what the type of exhibits we were supposed to have going on. Then shortly after that, in 1998, we had Homelands. If you remember Homelands, the permanent exhibition, that moved into that 4,000 square foot space. And that was a wonderful exhibit that was worked with professional exhibit designers, and it had the textile collection, it had things from industry, it had a kind of a, if you remember, it had a sort of a reproduction castle area, and trying to really go through the history of the Czech and Slovak peoples and using our own collection. And the problem we had kind of with that exhibition was our collection was so much old world, and we didn't really have a lot from modern Czech and Slovak experiences or culture. So that was kind of always the thought, we need to change this a little bit. And also another thing that happened was we had homelands and it was really wonderful, but we thought, how are we going to bring people back to the NCSML? And this is when I started in 1999, and plans were underway. They actually took half of the rental space where people were supposed to have their weddings and things. So somehow the curator at that time was not me, it was Carmen Langel. She worked with Dan Baldwin, who was the executive director, and they were able to get half of that rental hall turned into what was then the Petrick Gallery. That was 2,000 square feet that was given over to temporary exhibits, and that was the whole point, to bring people back. You had this wonderful Homelands, which was the permanent exhibition, and that was really important for school tours because it really told the story of immigration and of the old country and art and folk culture. But to try to bring people in again and again, the curator at that time thought we really need to have traveling exhibits or temporary exhibits that we create ourselves. So this beautiful space opened up, and then in the first exhibit there, I don't know if you remember it, it was Czech Technology in Motion. So that was a big splash in the year 2000. That's when I had first started, so I remember working on that exhibit with the curator. And it had cars and motorcycles, and it even had some pieces of a locomotive train, and it had bicycles, and it was really a wonderful exhibition where the curator worked really hard to find collectors of all these things, because we weren't bringing vehicles over from Europe. They were already in this country. Plenty of car and motorcycle collectors, you know, lent their items to us. So that was another really exciting exhibit. So the bar was set pretty high for exhibits, I would think, at the Czech and Slovak Museum. And then after that, you might remember some of the other titles. There was Formal Settings, which was porcelain. There was Glass Behind the Iron Curtain, which was on loan from the Corning Museum of Glass. And we had some of our own items on display as well. And we're always trying to reach different audiences. That's kind of the point of some of our exhibits, is like, don't do the same thing all the time. Try to have a different topics so you'll attract different people. And so that's kind of what we've always been doing with this Petrick Gallery. And this continued on, and between 1997, when we had 1,000 Years of Czech Culture, and 2008, which of course was the flood year, we had over 50 exhibitions. I think I'm missing some of them. I counted as best I could, but unfortunately some of the records are lost from the flood. But just trying to use my own memory, so I think it's probably much closer to 70 than the 50, because we used to have the Alaska Gallery was the hallway going between, kind of behind the exhibits, and that was actually the Alaska Gallery, and we had exhibits in that one, but those are the records I can't find. But I remember doing those. We had like the Easter eggs out one time, and we had something about WFLA one time, sometimes traveling art. So we really were making an effort to bring the traveling exhibitions here. So that's kind of taking us up to the flood time. And then, of course, the years between 2008 and 2012, we had 3 exhibitions. We had, remember at Lyndale Mall, there was Pack Your Bags, A Journey to America, and that was an attempt to try to keep our name out there and to still be relevant to the school tour crowd, because it told the story of Czech and Slovak immigration. And that was kind of interesting, being out at the mall, having an exhibit at the mall. It was just, and we had a little store there too, if you remember that. And then we had the National Collection was again at the Cedar Rapids Museum of Art. So it was kind of going back in time. And I think at that time, I didn't even know that there had been the original exhibit in 1974 had been at the Art Museum. That was news to me. So they gave us gallery space so we could again keep our name out there. So that was a beautiful collection of just our best artifacts, and also to show we saved all this. This was not damaged in the flood. We had so many wonderful artifacts that were just fine. So it was a lot of reasons to have that exhibition. It was very popular. And then you remember Rising Above at the COSEC building, which told the story of the people in the flood. And I will confess, I hated that exhibit, hated every minute of it. Because who wants to be always reliving, you know, it was very traumatic to us who were here, the flood and the whole aftermath of it and the destruction of everything. So then to have to tell it in exhibit form was really difficult to do. But it was important because people needed to hear that story. And you know, we knew as soon as the flood was happening, we knew we were going to have to collect the story of the flood, even if we weren't going to do an exhibition, but we thought we probably would have to. we knew that this is, it's our history. We had to somehow document it. So we hired a professional photographer to go around taking pictures of the aftermath, and we interviewed people, and we have a lot of oral histories actually of flood survivors that are all sort of part of our collection, and that became part of the Rising Above exhibit. So that was my only case, I guess, of actually living through a historic event, collecting the data, and preparing an exhibit all at the same time. And I would say it's probably a good experience to have, but I wouldn't want to have every national, it's not worth it. The natural disaster is not worth the trauma of having to do an exhibit about it. But that was something that you can't deny it. It's part of our history. And that actually has moved down to the elevator lobby, some pieces of that, because we still have people 15, 16 years out who are, what happened? They don't know, and so we sort of remind people of it. So then if you remember, we built this beautiful building we're in now, move the building, have this wonderful addition that we're all in now, and tripled our size, I believe, and started out right away with more gallery space. If you think back to the original building, the 1995 building is what I call the original building. The 1995 building, we had Homelands, which was about 4,000 square feet, and then we had the Petrick Gallery, which was 2,000 square feet, and then the Laska hallway, kind of similar to our Anderson hallway now, where not a lot of space for much more than two-dimensional things on the wall. Sometimes you could put cases in there, which we have, now, as you can see, so it works for that too. It's a smaller space, so we really were lucky that we had the big space, the 2,000 square foot, and then the smaller several hundred square feet, because it fits all the different exhibits that you might need. So when we got to this building, there was a thought that we need more gallery space because we need more exhibits, and again, more stories to tell, more people to bring back in with our traveling and temporary exhibits. So now we have a permanent exhibition that's over 7,000 square feet, so that's nearly double the size of Homelands. And then we have Petrick Gallery again, which is actually a little smaller than the original Petrick Gallery. It's 1,700 square feet. And then the Smith Gallery, which is 800 square feet. And then the Anderson Gallery, which is about 70 linear feet. I don't really know how much square footage it is, but it's 70 linear feet, which has worked out wonderful for us. And now we're actually using this library space that we're sitting in right now. That's also an exhibit space, smaller than the Anderson Gallery, so it fits. Sometimes we get offers of things that just the size of it is going to work the best in here. So it's really good to have a lot of flexibility and a lot of exhibit space, but that really makes us, doubles our work. Tricia Bender is the collections manager, and we work on the exhibits, and we fully spend half of our time. We figured it out one time, 6 months out of every year we're working on exhibits, and then the rest of the time is with the collection or other museum things. So you might remember the very first really big exhibit we had in this building in 2012 to open it was the Alphonse Mucha exhibition. That was probably going to be one of the all-time greatest exhibits we've ever had after 1,000 years of Czech culture. So that was in what is now the permanent gallery, so it was 7,000 square feet. And that was a once in the institution's lifetime were we able to have that big of a space available for a temporary exhibit, because now it's our permanent exhibition, so it's not available for that anymore. So before we opened the permanent exhibition, we used that space to have this wonderful Mucha exhibit. It's one of the largest Mucha exhibits that ever worldwide. Definitely larger than any of the ones you're going to find in Prague or in Moravsky Krumlov, because they don't have that much space to devote to this, and we'll never have that much space to devote to it again. So that was really exciting, and in order to prepare for that exhibition, I actually got to go to Prague and meet with the Mucha family. So his Alphonse Mucha's grandson he still is alive today. It was his grandson, and his daughter-in-law it was still alive at the time, but I didn't get to meet her. She wasn't doing very well, but they have this house in Prague called the Mucha House, and after his death, they had moved everything from his lodgings and from his home and from his time in Paris to this house. And so that's where the grandson had grown up as a boy. His parents lived in this house, so it's just filled with art. And they allowed me to go through and just look at things on the wall and say what we could have in this exhibition. Some of them were family pieces that had never been seen by anybody but the family before. Some of them were very famous pieces. And of course, they had much more art stored in London and in Prague. It wasn't all in this house, but some of the things in this house were really special to the family. There was a piece I remember that he wouldn't let me have, which was the grandson. His name was John Mucha. His desk, when he was a kid, he had this little desk in his bedroom, which he was showing me. And if you opened up the lid of it, it was sort of like a secretary. He opened up the lid of it, and Mucha had painted on the desk. And I was just salivating like we had, but he didn't want to send it, which is fine. I understand a beautiful family piece like that. But, you know, he had done his homework at this desk that his famous grandfather had painted. And another piece was there was this little sculpture, and I was like, was Mucha a sculptor? No, it was from Rodin. Rodin had given him this sculpture. So, you know, it was really exciting. So that was probably the most memorable, perfect exhibition we could have had at that time, and that brought in many, many people. So now we've got 1,000 Years of Czech Culture and the Mucha exhibit bringing in the most people we had ever seen. And then meanwhile, kind of the supporting exhibits were going on all over the smaller galleries, just depending on where they fit in the best space. And so that kind of gave us a really good kickoff. And then since then, I actually did a calculation, over 50 exhibits until 2008, and then 3 during the flood intervening years. And then since 2012 to 2023, 91 exhibitions. And in 2024, we got 10 planned. It's usually between 10 and 11 exhibits that we do every year, and that's not including those cases in the Grand Hall, even though that's always changing, but I can't even keep track of how often Tricia changes those to keep up with it. And kind of the highlights of, I mean, they're all wonderful. I mean, my favorite exhibit, the first one I got to really do as curator, I became curator in 2007, and then my first really important exhibit was the 1968 exhibit that 2008 was an anniversary year for 1968, and it was a really wonderful exhibition where we borrowed all kinds of cool things from the Museum of Communism in Prague and from the Wende Museum in California, which was about the East Germany, West Germany split. A lot of really cool things, but that was destroyed by the flood, so it was really sad that that was such a good exhibit and it didn't get to be seen by as many people as it could. So moving on from that, then you can imagine some of the better exhibits we've had, I think, are like the Amadeus one, if you remember the costumes from the movie Amadeus. That was really neat because Amadeus was filmed, a lot of the film locations were in Prague, and Barrandov Studios in Prague was responsible for that, and they had all the costumes from the movie. And so we were able to borrow the costumes, and of course Milos Forman was the director, so there was a lot of connections to the Czech Republic. So we were able to actually rent the costumes from the movie studio and have those on display, and that was kind of one of those things where like, we bring so many exhibits to Cedar Rapids and to America really that are never going to, who else is going to seek those things out except for us, you know? And so that was appealing to movie lovers and Amadeus lovers, you know, so it's totally different maybe than the crowd that is going to come and see the Czech technology in motion, for example, or if we have an art exhibit from Andy Warhol. You know, we've been able to really work a lot with, I'm speaking a lot about exhibits that we've borrowed from other collections, but you know, there's also ones that we make of our own, you know, our own artifacts, like the one we have now, the Marge Nadel folk art exhibit. We borrowed some of those things from local people, and then we have our own collection, kind of a combination of that. And some of the other, I have so many here. I have this whole list of all the exhibits. And so we've done our own perfume bottles. Remember that one? That was a really good one. And that's one that we would like to turn into a traveling exhibition that people could borrow from us. We would like to be able to package all those perfume bottles into special crates with little, you know, perfect little openings for each little individual perfume bottle. That's kind of a big job to do, but then it's all ready to go, and the other museums could borrow that from us. So that's kind of a goal to, we kind of thought it'd be the best one. And then maybe our textiles too, because our textile collection is probably, we have more than any place outside of the Czech or Slovak republics. there's a few private collections that are pretty big, but as far as a museum goes, we have the biggest collection of the textiles from the Czech Republic and Slovak Republic. So we think that'd be great if some other museums would want to borrow that from us. So it'd be kind of an exchange, because we borrow from a lot of other museums to bring different kind of exhibits here. But if we could lend, that would be really awesome. So now I will tell you a little bit about the upcoming exhibits in 2024. And we're having, the reason why I was going into all this exhibit history was the very first one opening February 10th, which is next week. We're having exhibit revisit. So we're going to have the title banners and posters from past exhibits, and some of the games and interactives of them, or some of the videos that went with some of them. So it's just kind of a way to walk through and remember all the exhibits. So Dave Malena, the librarian, is looking for some things from 1,000 Years of Czech Culture. I used to have a poster of it, but it got ruined, so I don't have it anymore. Some of the exhibits will be represented with like their poster or their title panel. And we're having, if you remember Beer Please, remember that exhibit all about beer? That was a lot of fun. And we had some really fun games in that. There's a bar that it has a mirror behind it, and when there's a trivia question written at the base of the beer pole. I'm not sure what that thing is called, where you would pour a beer from it. And if you pull on it, then the answer appears in the mirror behind the bar. So we're trying to, get that working again. And we have some videos from the Slovak Treasures of Slovakia exhibit that we had. There was some really cute videos that they provided for us. We'll probably have the garnet mining, bring that out again, and just trying to combine it with like the beauty of some of these title panels are really, really nice. And they're like based on the exhibit or based on the art that's in the exhibit. So they're really cool. And then we'll have some of the games. So that's going on February 10th in the Petrick Gallery. And then after that is Mucha. So we're doing Mucha again. Different Mucha collection. We're not working with the family this time. We're working with a private U.S. collection. So we're going to have 75 pieces from Mucha, including paintings and drawings and posters. And that's going to be all summer long, May 3rd to September 1st. So we're looking forward to that. That's our big blockbuster. We, for many years, have said when we celebrate the 50th, what exhibit are we going to have? So we decided on Mucha, and you see we just had garnets the year before. We kind of snuck that in because that was a really hard choice. Like Mucha was a really popular exhibit. The garnet exhibit we did in 2005 was really popular. So you want to kind of go back to like what did people really, really love and talk about for a long time, made them come to the museum and be more aware of us, got us a lot of volunteers, because they were interested in these exhibits that we had. So it really can reach out to all kinds of different areas. So Mucha it is. So we're doing Mucha, and that'll be really nice. We're hoping to have people coming from all over the Midwest to see it. The collection is on tour. It didn't go anywhere last year, which I thought was interesting. And this year it's going to be in Florida, and then it'll be here, and then in the fall it'll end up in California. So really we're in the center of where people can see this exhibition. And then at the end of the year, after Mucha leaves, we're going to have a really interesting exhibit. And it's, we're still working on a title, but it's an exhibit that is about modern fashion designers using textiles and patterns and elements from folk dress, but making modern clothing out of it. So some of the pieces I've seen are really, really cool. So we're hoping that that's kind of a big flash of, old meets new in the designers. So that's going to be the Petrick Gallery for next year. And then the Smith Gallery, which is the 800 square foot gallery, that's going to have, for most of the year, it's going to have what we call the National Collection. And when we have the National Collection, it means the best things from our own collection. 50 years of NCSML. So this is for our 50th to kind of just show people this is what we've been collecting since 1974, and probably before if you count everybody's family collection that they've been working on their whole lives and then giving it to the museum. So you're going to see the motorcycles, beaded bags, a lot of the textiles, just everything that we don't even know yet, everything we're going to pull out, because we have probably 15,000 items in the collection, and it's really hard to choose what gets to go in here. But it's really going to be the, either the weirdest thing or the most beautiful thing, or you try to think in superlatives to try to figure out what gets to be in here. And so that'll be a lot of fun. And then the Anderson Gallery, we've got right now Marge Nadel, Master Folk Artist, which has been really, really popular, and beautiful, beautiful items on display. And then after that is going to be a really significant exhibition, Václav Havel, From Dissident to President. That's a really totally different topic. We go from beautiful folk art to politics and dissident and communism and oppression. And so it's all about Václav Havel and his work to work towards a free Czechoslovakia and then ultimately the Czech Republic. And that's done by the Havel Presidential Library, I believe, and also the Czech Center in New York and the embassy, and all kinds of people have been working together on this. So we're going to have our turn to have that. And then this library exhibit, we're going to actually have something on stamps finally. You wouldn't believe how many people actually have been asking us to do exhibits about stamps and about money. There's a certain group of enthusiasts who really like those two topics. So there is a group that has been working with Leroy Bradway, the archivist here at the library, and they've been working on stamps for a couple of years now. So they're going to have an exhibition March 23rd here in the library that is going to be some of the work they've done. So showcasing just some of the beautiful stamps. The stamp art is really impressive in Czech and Slovak republics. It is gorgeous. So I think that'll be really neat. And then Czech composers. So in this space, after that, this will be June through August. So in the summertime, we'll have Czech composers, famous Czech composers. And it's kind of a graphic artist was hired to make more almost like a cartoon style, like graphic novel style, telling the lives of Janacek, Dvorak, Martinu, and Smetana. So that'll be kind of a fresh way to look at these composers. And that's also from the Czech centers and the museums in Prague who put this traveling exhibit together. And then finally, in this space, at the end of the year, we're going to have something called Exodus Report. And a photojournalist, I have to look at her name, it's Jana Rakova, she's a photojournalist, and she's been collecting stories of Ukrainians who have found refuge in Slovakia. So she's been photographing them and taking their stories down. So it's a very powerful, kind of important exhibition of that part of this is like history that's going on right now. This is current events, and it will become part of history. So we're really running the gamut in this gallery between stamps and Czech composers and then Ukrainian refugees to Slovakia. That kind of rounds out our 2024, and that's 10 exhibits, 10 exhibits for 2024. So we wish everybody would come back 10 times to see everything, but that's what we're hoping to do. And just one more quick thing on exhibits is we also have traveling exhibitions, which are panels that travel around to maybe the kind of place that doesn't have enough space to have an exhibit with lots of artifacts in it, but they, like a Sokol Hall or a fraternal organization or a library or a Czech center in another part of the country, they borrow these panel exhibits that we have. I think we're up to about 20 by now, and that's a really successful program for us. And I just finished one called Hello Slovakia, and it's 8 panels, and each panel highlights a state or a kraj, K-R-A-J, of the Slovak Republic. And so it's all about kind of the highlights of it or the history of it or what you can't miss when you go there. So it's kind of a fun one. And then we are working with Global Slovakia, and this year they're creating an exhibit which will be these panels that will travel, and it's about Slovak settlement in the United States. So that's 2 really important recent traveling exhibits. But those topics we've had sometimes they're based on an exhibit we've had here, like the robot exhibit we had. We turned that into a traveling exhibit, or Guts and Glory, which was about World War I. We turned that into a traveling exhibit. So sometimes something we've already had here gets turned into this panel form so it can travel around more. So we're kind of, with our exhibits, we're bringing people here, and we're also hoping to touch people, you know, outside. So that was kind of an exhaustive look at all our exhibits. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I just hope you all enjoy the exhibits, because that's the most fun part of my job. Is I'm glad it's 50% of my job, because it's also the most nerve-wracking. It used to be that I would say it's not an exhibit if I haven't, like, you know, cut myself and cried. I mean, it's just like you hurt yourself and you cry about the stress of it, and then you're all excited to open it up finally. It's a lot of fun.
Stephanie, you mentioned Andy Warhol. Are we going to see Warhol?
Yes, we are. We actually, in our own collection, we have been given a Warhol silkscreen on electric chair. And we had to get it reframed. It was given to us. It actually had been sitting on somebody's closed-in back porch, which really is disturbing. But it was fine, except for it needed to be reframed, kind of. So we got a new frame for it, and we're going to actually probably have it in 2 exhibits this year. We're going to have it in Exhibit Revisit next to our Andy Warhol title panel, and then it will be in the National Collection. I almost called it the National Treasures. It is, but the National Collection, it will be on display in there, because it's obviously one of our most important artifacts. And I know Andy Warhol was Carpatho-Rusine, but we all like to claim him as a Slovak, because his parents had Slovak passports. The part of the world they lived in was under Slovakia when they got their passports back around World War I time.
You also mentioned Mucha, right? And I, together with Dvořák, these 2 Czech phenomenal artists, they spent some time in the States, right? Speaking about Mucha, not so many people know that he spent some time in Chicago.
Yeah, he did. He I think was in America maybe 3 different times, all around like 1906, 1908, these times, and he actually taught art at the Art Institute of Chicago, and lectured there, and he painted portraits too. So there are some people in the Chicago area who might have a family portrait that was painted by Mucha, and I just sometimes drives me crazy thinking, I wonder if they know that, if it's just hanging on their wall and they just don't even realize it. So that is an important connection. So we're hoping when we have this Mucha exhibition that we can sort of appeal to people in Illinois, the Chicago area, the Chicago Art Institute's people, like, do they want to come and see this Mucha exhibition?
And Dvořák was in Spillville.
Yes.
And his New World Symphony, part of it was for a calisthenic number for the at Du Sokols.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Wow, that's interesting.
And that was for a national sled. It was really beautiful.
That when we have the Czech composers exhibit, I was interested to see. I haven't seen it yet, but when I see it, I want to find, do they even mention, because he had such a long and storied life. I don't know if over the people in the Czech Republic who made it, if they'll mention a lot about his time in the U.S. I don't know how they could not with the New World Symphony, you know. So that'll be interesting to see if they even mention Spillville.
It was beautiful.
Stephanie, you mentioned that we are going to have the exhibit on Václav Havel. When is it coming, and how long are we going to have it?
It is, I have it right here. It is starting April 27th and ending September 29th in the Anderson Gallery. And it includes panels and some sculpture. So it's going to be a combination of informative panels, images, and then some sculpture.
What I like about Václav Havel is that he was here. He opens together with President Clinton and President Kolache this building. And there are some funny stories, right, with Václav Havel from this museum.
Oh, are there? Well, that would be fun to have people bring those forth. The only story I know is that he, I've heard the story of how, was he the one that went to the restaurant and got like a beef sandwich with horseradish on it? I think that's the only good story I've ever heard, because I wasn't here quite then yet. But Joni, if you have a good story, tell us.
Well, I was on the board then, and when he was here, he was smoking, but didn't know that you couldn't, and nobody had the nerve to tell him that he couldn't smoke. So he's smoking and he's dumping his ashes in his hand.
Oh, wow.
And everybody kept saying, who's going to tell him? Who's going to tell him?
Did anybody tell him? No one told him. Okay.
So I guess I have two questions.
Yeah.
Just your own personal opinion. First question being was there ever an exhibit that you thought would bring in a lot more visitors than actually ended up happening? And the second question is what would a sort of dream exhibit you've always wanted to do here, and if you had the resources, what would your dream?
Oh gosh.
exhibit to bring?
Well, the first one that comes to mind was maybe disappointing attendance is we did in 2021, we did an exhibit called 20th Century Sensations, and it was a lot of work. We had Czech and Slovak, like famous people, Czech and Slovak from the arts and from science and from law, and like Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's, was in there, or Sissy Spacek, the actress, like people, and I guess it was really exciting for the curator and I to work on it, and we thought it was so cool, and it was a lot of work, and then it just really didn't resonate, I guess, somehow. So that was probably the only one that comes to mind. As far as like a dream exhibit, I mean, I hadn't really thought of that. I mean, I really, usually if I think something would be cool, we're able to do it. But I did have somebody who had a dream exhibit that they wanted me to do. A woman called me on the phone, and she was really excited because she was a Cars, the band The Cars from the 80s, and Rick Ocasek is a Czech/Czech American, and another member of the group was also like a Slovak American, and she really thought it would be cool if we did an exhibit on that, which would be cool, but those are the kind of exhibits where you would have to be able to find all kinds of footage and multimedia. So yeah, I mean, if you can imagine trying to do something that has to do with music or the movies or anything where you would have to get a lot of footage and get the rights to them and stuff. So I think that in my mind, sometimes think if we could do something about the Czech New Wave and we have a small section in our permanent exhibition about the Czech New Wave, but if we could do a really big exhibit that had lots of artifacts from movies and film footage and a lot of sound, and that can get very expensive, the technology. And then for a temporary exhibit that will be up for 5 months, it's usually, you don't really want to spend that much money on it. So that's more the thing that holds you back is like, is it really worth all this effort and technology and everything, and then it has to go away so soon. It's always sad to see them go. I don't know if there's ever been one I've been glad to see go. I mean, because you kind of get attached to them, and they're like, I mean, I remember, not to bring everybody down, but I remember when we came back after the flood and we were allowed in this building for the first time, and I saw the 1968 exhibit, which had been my child because it was the first exhibit I did as the curator, and I was just like crying and crying because like it's just dead, so you get very attached to them. So I'm sorry to freak everybody out, but curators get attached to their exhibits.
Another small thing about when they were here, the three presidents, they brought big gifts for the museum.
Yes.
Our gift was an egg from me.
Oh, well, wonderful.
But I had to have it done at a certain time because they needed to x-ray it, see if there was anything in the egg.
Did you have to make 3, one for each of them?
Yes.
Oh, how neat. I wonder if Clinton's is at the Presidential Library and Museum. Usually they put those gifts that they get as president in their library. We should find out. I'm going to find out. So we have the vase that Václav Havel brought us, and that's on display right now. It's almost always on display in the permanent exhibition. And unfortunately, a Modra plate that was given to us by Kovacs was damaged in the flood. So that was too bad. But the Havel vase survived. And I don't know if Clinton brought us anything. I couldn't tell you. I don't believe so. But then I could see that they were coming from another country to celebrate the opening of the museum, so I could see why they would bring us something nice.
Stephanie, this museum has been really big with its exhibits, in the recent 50 years. Is there anything like a wish that you would, because this year we have been celebrating 50th anniversary. If you have a chance to wish something for the coming 50 years? Speaking about the exhibits,
Yeah.
what would that be like?
Oh gosh, I just think that we get to do so many cool exhibits now. I guess I would wish that we could work more with museums in the Czech Republic and the Slovak Republic and really be able to bring more items here that people never have seen before. And that mainly would take a lot of money because it's the shipping of those international exhibits that costs so much. And so I think if we could somehow be able to afford to work with not just the national museums, but lots of smaller museums and really keep bringing art more, from different eras beyond Muka. Bring in the art, bring in the artifacts, bring in just really exciting to me history type exhibits that we just couldn't get over here because time starts in the 1850s for the Czech and Slovak Americans. It's wanting to go back and having medieval things. I mean, I'd love to have like suits of armor and big pieces of castles and things like that. So yeah, that's what I would wish we could have.
Stephanie, how are most of the exhibits funded? Do you have an endowment that people invest in, or?
The development team does a really good job of raising money, and there is usually an exhibit fund, and sometimes we get grant funding. But yes, it's really dependent on finding people who are interested in, if you're an art lover, maybe you will donate to being able to bring the Muka exhibit here. So I think that's kind of what goes on. I think we would like to in the future have an endowed exhibit fund, so then a lot more things would be possible as far as if the money is a burden to it. Sometimes customs are a burden to things being able to come in and out of the countries. We had an issue with some of the things in the garnet exhibit never being able to make it because they were made out of bone and ivory, and they're just not allowed to come in because of laws, So, and most things that leave the Czech and Slovak museums, they have to go through their ministries of culture and they have to get approval to come through. So, those sometimes can be a little bit tricky too, but yeah. Well, if that's it, we could probably wrap it up, couldn't we? Thanks for coming to Coffee and Kolache again for February, and we'll see you in March.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks. Boy, thanks for listening.